All right, time for another thing. So we've got Messiahbali, and he wants to, or she wants to improve this scene. Still a work in progress. All right, let's have a look. So, I think I also read in the comments that you wanted to add some more stuff in. I think that there's two major things that I wanted to say about this piece. Is first the composition, which is a really common thing for some people on here, is that it's quite bland, and if you get the composition right, you won't need to fill it up as much. So I would be looking at this piece, say like where the camera is sort of running parallel to one of these walls, and then maybe you're looking either at the table or the lounges a bit more straight on, which will just make it a bit more aesthetic rather than having the corner completely in the middle of the picture, as well as minimizing the floor space and roof, like ceiling, taking up a lot of the image. I would also consider the actual position of the pieces. Like if you were in this house, your TV probably wouldn't be facing away from that wall. Like you'd probably have the lounge where the TV is, and then the TV against the wall, so then you can look out across the ocean while you're sitting down. Like that's something to think about, as well as just considering like where are the cables going. You know, it's probably better for them to run against the wall than right in the middle, unless it's wireless. But you know, it's something to think about. The other thing I'd be looking at is the colouring of this. So it's quite overexposed, especially in the ground here, where it's basically pure white, and there's no sort of like glow. I think it seems like I would just be adding in just maybe even some slight bloom, just to try and show that sort of spraying of light from through the camera. Because honestly, your models all look pretty good, apart from possibly these being a bit too thin. They just sort of look like they would shatter the ground a little bit more, but that's just me. Overall though, your models are really good, especially like the use of different materials and like the different types of models that you make. So I did just do a slight adjustment here where it's hard to bring in those details because of it being so overexposed, but just adding a bit more of like a yellowy temperature. All I did was going into Photoshop or GIMP and adjusted the contrast slightly and then up the temperature to make it just a bit more yellow. Now it does sort of muddy up the picture, and like hopefully you could do that with the lighting in the scene, but it makes it like it's more of an actual living area compared to this space where it's quite white with blue, and then they've got a bit of gold. Like it's very like mechanical and emotionless, where I do feel like just adding a little bit of a yellow over it, where you can adjust it slightly to get it perfect, just makes it more look like you were on like a beachfront or ocean view sort of hotel or house. That's all I've got to say about that, man. Alright, and then we got JJBloon, and OC I actually liked enough to post. Going for photorealism, any tips? And then we've got the other picture, which is just this. So, first thing I'd say is I do really like the composition. I think you could work it just a little bit more, just cutting some edges out, and because it's quite I would say bland image, like in the sense that this guy doesn't have much going on. Like once you have a bit more detail, you can work it out a little bit more. Let's go from a few different elements. So if we were to add a bit more, maybe even just an image for the background, like of the sky, that could add a whole lot of detail to it. Then I would be implementing some fog, because that's obviously why the light ray is working, and that it'd be giving a bit more context to the night. I'd be adding in some more background details to give a bit more scale to the lighthouse. And then for the actual modeling, this section up here, I'd be pretty happy with. It's a little bit bland on this top bit. and a bit too basic generally over this piece. Like, you could smooth this out using the smooth shader, like like adding the smooth material. This map does look slightly stretched with the cracks, so I would be looking into either making a custom one or just looking into how it's stretching. I would add maybe just some slight reflection on it, looking into the material of the lighthouse. Or like, I think you are actually probably going for then the straight lines. So I would add in a bevel on these lines just to catch light in a bit of a better way, especially how it gets quite dark down in here. And same with this, where it's got like a sort of dotty look to it, like as if the lighting didn't have enough resolution, or you were going for as if there were trees over it. I feel like it's the former. But I'd be looking into maybe some slight reflection, adding a texture over the top of it with a normal map to give it a bit extra bump. And that would be applying for also the actual room too. Like, thinking in contextually where this place would be, maybe like just, like a little bucket or something in there, or like a little plant coming out of the ground. Maybe just different colored rocks as well. I can see you've added in a few little extra rocks around to give it a bit of a difference. These rocks, I would say that I'm not sure if you've made them yourselves, but they don't fit in with the level of detail that this lighthouse has. And now that doesn't mean that this needs to have all little bumps and rocks and stuff, but it needs to catch the light in a similar way that this does. And I would also say that your actual setting up of lighting, you can use a slight blue light and a slight yellow light on the two different angles to create a bit more depth to the picture, especially catching the rocks a little bit more and just making it pop out a bit more. So thinking of the yellow light more as like, say, the reflected sunlight coming along, and then the blue light being like the reflection of the sky or the dark night, to catch and be like a fill light for those extra areas. This ocean sea thing doesn't have enough resolution in its polygons to really capture that detail. I'd be adding some spray as well, especially as it like laps up against the rocks. And I would also consider maybe using some foreground stuff too, possibly like maybe some more of the ocean waves going up a bit closer to the front here, and then considering using depth of field to add a bit of depth compared to the background and then the foreground and everything, as well as adding in some bloom from that light as if it was coming through a camera lens. But yeah, you should be happy with that. That was really good stuff. I'll just check if I'm recording still. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so we've got PPP223. First time posting on here. Anyways, made a forest scene render. Cool, so let's have a look. Alright, so we've got like really interesting ground. I like it. The background though, I would probably just make a pure black or a really dark blue, just because then it would be the night sky. I like the moon coming through. I would probably add some bloom or something in there to make that light. I do love bloom to come in there and pop out a little bit more. The ground looks really good. I'd be really happy with that. It doesn't meet with your tent model though. I would be looking into adding some detail into the wood pieces there. And then we've got a strange sort of light thing here. I'm not really sure what that is, so I can't really comment on it too much. And I would say too about adding just some more details within the tree, branch things, whatever they're called, the main part of the tree, because it would need to match this sort of detail. So I think that also, yeah, it's adding just a bit more of a focal point over here or on the moon. Thinking about that, if this is the actual cause of light, then there would be shadows coming across here a bit more, or at least a more bluey look. It's as if you have the moon there, but you aren't considering why it's there. and then also I would be using some foreground elements too here to break up the scene a little bit and make you look, say, maybe as if you're looking through the bushes into this, giving it a bit more context. But yeah, that generally a pretty alright composition. I reckon that you need to choose a focal point, because at the moment it has 2. It would be better if it had 3, say something down here, or just 1 itself. But yeah, overall pretty good stuff. Alright, Jeremy Stover. Now I helped this guy out just the other day, so it's cool to see some progress. He said super stiff, still and gross looking, but it's the largest animation I've done. Smiley face. Yeah, you should be smiling. Alright, so let's have a bit of a look. So I helped him out with his composition the other day, and I feel like, yeah, it's definitely composed a whole lot better. I'd be maybe considering adding a more fog, like of black, because you can see this section up here showing where you shouldn't really be seeing that. Maybe positioning these trees a little bit closer to the fence, and then adding a whole lot more of them just to add that sort of change. Especially adding in these rocks a little bit closer to the foreground too. And now I'm not going to comment so much on the animation because it looks like it's still quite new to you. And that's cool. I would just be looking into the render settings to maintain this sort of shadow across the whole animation, or just cutting out that start part. Think about why you're moving the camera, because at the moment you're just wiggling it from side to side. I would choose one angle and then slide it over the other side and doing it slower. Now I can see that this is probably just a screen recording of you doing the render. I would learn how to do an actual render, man. Like, and now let's zoom it in a little bit more. So you've got the focus of the person walking up. You could hold this shot for a long time, but then you could at one point see how the camera is paused here. You could like start to zoom in slowly into the person, looking into those details that you're added. And then obviously like adding maybe some motion blur and stuff as well as the person's falling down. Yeah, like I would even just look into adding a slight vidnet, the I never say it right, adding one of those in just around the edges to give a bit more of an emphasis on that that treehouse. But yeah, no, heaps better. Awesome. Alright, and then we've got Oscar Ostos. I'm a beginner at Blender and this is one of my first models. Any advices to improve it? Any advice? Alright. So first thing is, it doesn't seem like you have much of a focal point. Like if you were to think about if a person was to take this photo, why they would put this here, you might be thinking that, yeah, you're taking a photo of everything in the room. But the angle is slightly off. You can see up here that the camera is on a slight angle, or this roof is on a slight angle. I would say that it's the camera because also the ground is off a little bit. It's as if you were trying to take a photo of this middle point. I would choose an element, like it could be the train here, and focus on that, or it could be the like, you know, just something in particular rather than just trying to take a photo of everything, which I know it's common for people that are trying to make renders. They want to get everything that they've modeled, but you should think about modeling the scene, but then actually thinking what's the focal point. I would be also looking into this train where why you've got these reflections here. Like you might want to adjust the angle of that, like, and adding in a bit of a bevel and stuff around the edge of these, just so it can catch the light a little bit better. As well as adding in some like things like dirt and everything too. Maybe just, I think you've got a slight reflection on this, but it's hard to say. Just adding in a slight reflection so it gives a bit more realism to it. Looking into how your textures repeat over and over again, so making sure that they don't noticeably repeat, It's a bit different with these because you would expect that maybe the people have put that in intentionally to repeat, like it was a big strip of things. And also it's strange that this pole goes in front of this thing here. Like the wall is a bit confusing here, as if this comes out, but then it sort of doesn't as well. Like, I also am confused why this would be directly in front of a sign that they would put there. You should think contextually about why you're doing what you're doing. And also looking into using anti-aliasing or doing a higher render to capture like less artifacting in the picture. But yeah, it's mostly just adding some extra details into the polygons. So like adding bevels so that it'll catch the light a bit more naturally. And yeah, thinking of a focal point. But overall, yeah, it's a great render, honestly. I love this wall. Yeah. All right, and then we've got immediate primary 18. How can I improve this render? So we've got, I would say it's like a, either like a pen or whatever, the sonic screwdriver or something like that, or like a lightsaber. First thing is to position the model if like it could be on, so instead of it being flat, moving it back and putting it on a slight angle so you see the dimension of it a bit more. This would be more like a concept piece anyway, so it does depend on why or who you're giving it to. But I would just be putting it on the ground somewhere so you can catch a shadow with it, as well as maybe a reflective ground to add to what this is. I would look into having the background not as the same color as the piece. So maybe like a dark blue or an orange, or it could be like a black or something, but I would be thinking about using a slightly colored light just to emphasize a bit more warmth or something to the piece, or even using like, you know, like a green or a blue light to make it look more like cyber or sci-fi and stuff too. Now, in terms of the actual model, I do like the slight details and stuff here, but on here it does just look like it's smearing a little bit and it's not really fully intentional. So maybe I would be considering making this less stretched and probably just repeat to make it look a little bit less stretched, and then adding a slight normal map over it to catch little bumps on here and there. This here, you can see the polygons, so I'll be looking into trying to smooth this out, as well as adding in a slight bevel just around these edges so it catches the light just a bit more cleanly. I do like the material though that you've added, you can catch it there. And again, same with this section here, is just adding a bit more of like texture by adding a slight normal map on these little strips and streams here. Yeah, and then probably just throw on some bloom, depth of field especially for this to give it a sense of scale. And yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Cool. All right, Leo Fonte 33, Californian desert home. I finally finished this scene. Thoughts? All right, well, it's good, but let's tear it to pieces. Okay, so I think this is actually the first shot that you had on that. So overall, looks great in terms of texture, materials and stuff, like models that you're using, and lighting is pretty good. And that would go the same with this one too. But I would say composition and a lot of little weak things are going on in here, like a lot of little things. So composition, you've got a lot of sky. Now you could either lift the camera up to focus on the sky, or you could, as you've done with this piece, slightly adjust the camera angle to capture a bit more of what you're trying to look at. So here there's a bit more obvious stuff, like I'm looking at this house, but I'm actually more drawn to the car in this piece. because it's a bit more forwards and it's darker. There's a lot of darker areas in there. So I don't know if that was fully your intention, but I would then just maybe slightly move the camera to look at the car more, because that's the focal point in that piece. And it does create like an artistic sort of look, but I'm sort of thinking that you're wanting to present the renders rather than like present your models rather than making an artistic piece purely from this. And so same with this one, it does look great. It's much more balanced than the other one, where I do see a sort of the hint of the car and then the cactus, and then it leads into the bones, like the skull too. But I think that by cutting half this car out, you're making the piece weaker. Like, I feel like you could move this car back into this section here, and then that will really improve the piece, because then the car will become the focal point, and it will become a more balanced picture. But then I would probably just crop it down to a widescreen image, move this this bush up slightly, maybe to the side, to get a bit more foreground, and so then it'll be like a nice widescreen balanced picture. And now if we look into the actual modeling, so this model here could be a bit more carved in. It does look like you've made the general model and then slapped a texture on it. So I would be really thinking a bit more about the shapes, and when you're lighting it or positioning it, trying to emphasize the little curves and stuff that are in that piece. I'm assuming as well that you're using a skybox or a HDRI for the background, which is cool, maybe, but I would consider using an actual image, or doing it in post-production, possibly. Like, I don't know your exact process, but it just might give you a bit more control over what's going on. I do like that the lighting is matching the background. It could possibly be that this is modeled too, because it's matching that lighting. And so I would just, it's just something, I guess, to think about. Like, it's a good back part. It looks as though maybe you don't have enough lighting resolution in your picture, giving this grainy look. You could easily up this render. Now, it could be because of Reddit, maybe. So I'm not going to be too harsh on that, but it's just something to think about. Reflectivity is also a thing, because this could have a bit more reflection from the world around it, especially say the cactus as well. Even though it's not a highly reflective thing, it's still going to reflect some light, and especially on the car in this second one, I do know that it's got some reflectivity, but it depends on how matte you want it. But I would be adding just a little bit extra, so it's like highlighting the sky and stuff too. And and so contextually too, with this piece, I would be thinking about how this person's got this really nice house here, and then they've got all these little bushes and stuff around too. They would probably have been moving these bushes around so it looks nicer. So this will add to your piece too. If you were to add these bushes around this edge of where the sand meets the sandstone, it will give a nice blend. There's an artistic thing that people do where they have, say, a big piece, and then you have the little pieces at the edges of it. And it gives a nice triangular sort of shape. And so I would be putting some bushes and rocks just around the edge there, maybe considering about where the person would step off, adding some stairs or something here because they're going to their car. And a person wouldn't put a rock right there. How have they backed out and then they've driven over this rock every time or something? It's just something to think about. And yeah, that's just something that, also thinking about with these plants, how I would say you've used sprites that are like on different angles, I would be going in with just a little bit more detail with them so that you couldn't notice as much, because then it'll match with the rocks and stuff and it'll look a bit better. Same with this cactus in the background. That's a pretty poor cactus, to be honest. No offense. I would probably get rid of that. Just do another one of these. Just in the background here. Slightly adjust the color to be a bit more tan like this. But yeah, in terms of like modeling and stuff, you're doing really good. It's like you've got some really nice stuff going on. Nice. All right, good job. And then I think lastly, we've got Dragon Slayer Diaper. Hello everybody. I was starting using Blender a week ago. This is my first project. What do you guys think? Cool. All right. Well, for a week, you're doing great. So I'll see that you've got some like texture up here from like the lighting or something like that, which is awesome. You've got some rocks here, and then you've got this big sword going into the rock. So your composition is pretty okay. I would probably move, like I want to see a bit more of below this sword just to give it a bit more breathing room. And then I would probably drop these rocks down a little bit more, maybe even down this low. So then it gives a bit more attention to the top section of the sword and then the handle. And then maybe even adding in like a mountain or two in the background to give it a whole lot more depth, as well as even maybe adding some rocks in the foreground or some like grass coming up to now add a whole lot more depth to it. I do like the slight angle of the camera being off, but I think maybe you could enhance that a little bit more, like so it looks a bit more deliberate. Or you could go a bit more straight on, because at the moment it sort of feels like you weren't sure whether or not you're going to do it fully. So it's something to think about if you want to go more deliberate with it. Now in terms of the modeling of the sword, so I do like this top bit, and the handle looks pretty nice. I'd be maybe adding just a little band around that circular shape that's the same color as this part here, so it blends just a little bit more, like it's capsuled in it. And I would also, I like that you've added a little bit of bevel around here, that's good. Just maybe adding a few more details in here, like it doesn't need to be too much. And as we're going down here, maybe adding in some slight notches if it's like an older sword. And I do like the use of normal maps that you've got going on. I would add in a colored light just to give it a bit more warmth, and maybe adding in some bloom, maybe some ambient occlusion just to get some of that, the shadows on the inside bits there. If you wanted to keep the models and stuff exactly as they were, I would just be adding a bit more of a light from the top so it can catch on the rocks to come along here, but not too harsh, maybe just like a blurry sort of shadow here, just to give it a bit more sense of position and stuff in relation to these rocks. And I would assume maybe that these rocks weren't made by you, or you used a tutorial. And so I would be like considering the color of them in relation to the sky and then the sword. Like you want to tie everything in with like maybe 2 or 3 major colors in the piece. And so yeah, like, you know, you're doing good. All right, that's everything for everybody. Good job, everybody. Give yourselves a clap and pat on the back. You're doing great. All right, thanks everybody. See ya.